1 year ago, on September 24th, the road of life between Armenia and Artsakh became a road of genocide, on the heels of a 9-month starvation siege, punctuated by Nikol Pashinyan's recognition of Artsakh as Azerbaijan. Baku launched a deadly assault. Hundreds were killed in the last stand, not only soldiers and volunteers like the mayor of Martuni, but children. Dozens of people, namely elderly, died on the fraught passage to Armenia, where they would be forced to pass through an Azeri checkpoint and then an Armenian one. To this day, those who went missing have yet to be accounted for. The most respected of Artsakh's military and political elite, including philanthropist Rupen Vardanyan, were taken captive. They are still being held in Baku, which next month will host the premier UN Climate Summit, a platform for which they were endorsed by Armenia. This week on Hairenik, we'll be discussing this catastrophic event, as well as the efforts both inside and outside Armenia to take back control of Armenia's destiny. Let's go to our correspondent in Yerevan, Nari Navasaryan, for more. Welcome, Nari.
Hi, Elsie.
So, Nari, 1 year ago, all of Artsakh was emptied. The first founding prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, even before that final attack, was referring to the blockade as genocide. What happened? Let's remember, what was the sequence of events that forced the population to flee?
Well, in October, I believe in 2022, Prime Minister Pashinyan recognized Artsakh as Azerbaijan in Prague. And almost immediately after, in about 2 months' time, in December, Azerbaijan started the blockade of Artsakh. And this is not a new tactic. They had deployed this. They had tried besieging Artsakh Armenians in the 90s as well, many times. And at the time, Armenia went through the siege via any means possible, including sometimes, the pilots would fly through knowing what they're risking, and sometimes they would die. So, yeah, and of course there was the glorious opening of Berzor. The road of life was opened, the connection between Armenia and Artsakh established. This time around, Pashinyan made sure, gave all the guarantees to Azerbaijan and Turkey that Armenia is not going to interfere. So after about 9 months of besiegement, and Armenia, even though it had the ICJ decision saying that Azerbaijan must ensure the connection of Artsakh Armenians to Armenia, the Republic of Armenia, even though this decision was in place, Armenia again didn't act on it. And then a year ago, on the 19th of September, after sending off kids to school, students to school, after trying to send on the line for bread, suddenly Azerbaijan started attacking Artsakh on all fronts, and panic started. People started looking for their kids. It was very chaotic, and then news started going around about how kids were killed, about how we had martyrs everywhere, and we didn't know the numbers. We didn't have help from Armenia, and soon enough, people from everywhere all over Artsakh, after this info terror, started gathering in Stepanakert airport, and even some of the peacekeepers were killed in this Azeri attacks. And after gathering in Stepanakert, people had no choice but to lose their homeland, and Azerbaijan successfully ethnically cleansed all of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Indeed. And I think if we look back, I think it would be worth looking back on what the Prime Minister of Armenia said in those very fraught days between when the attack started and when the population fled. Let's play a video in which the Prime Minister speaks 1 year ago about his assessment of the threat to the population by Azerbaijan.
Հիմա այսօր այս պահին մեր գնահատականն այն է, որ Լեռնային Ղարաբաղի քաղաքացիական բնակչությանը ուղիղ սպառնալիք չկա.
So Nare, please tell us what Pashinyan had to say and give us your analysis of this.
Pashinyan claimed that there was no immediate threat to the civilian population of Artsakh, even though it was clearly not true. But for the longest time, instead of telling people that, okay, if Armenia stops being the security guarantor of Artsakh, then Artsakh is going to cease to exist, because Azerbaijan's plan all along has been to completely ethnically cleanse it. Instead of being truthful with the populations, they talked about mechanisms of guaranteeing the rights and security of the population in Azerbaijan, pretending that there is some sort of future possible there. And he just continues, Prime Minister Pashinyan continues this tactic of misleading people and pretending like what's going on is not, the ethnic cleansing is not really happening. And then he is also very masterfully switching the goalposts. He is talking already about the possibilities of, he's saying, in this very speech, he's saying, some are blaming us for closing the road in front of Artsakhis that want to come to Armenia. And then he promises that this is not true, that they've been preparing to actually welcome them, essentially making Armenia complicit in the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh.
I remember well those days because not only was there this incredible threat, we can't even call it a threat, because Azerbaijan had not only attacked militarily, killed soldiers, but killed civilians, killed children. It was an all-out assault on a republic that had essentially been abandoned and had been starved for 9 months and didn't even have gas for people to get around normally. But there was also kind of a paradox in Armenia, because those who were concerned about the fate of Artsakh took to the street. They took to the street because the Prime Minister had said there was no threat to the population. And not only that, but Armenia's Ministry of Defense had actually issued a statement saying that Armenia's borders were secure. That sparked a huge outcry. People spontaneously came to Republic Square, and they were met with brutal repression. The police used stun grenades on the crowd. And not only that, but there was huge propaganda against this demonstration, and we were referred to as agents of Russia who just wanted to take Nikol Pashinyan's chair. And not long after, right on cue, the floodgates were opened. And just as Ilham Aliyev had vowed, he would open the corridor, but only for people to go in one direction, which was out. And that is what happened. And until now, we are feeling the consequences not only of the loss of this millennia-old Armenian heartland, where the Armenian script was first taught in Amaras, but also the humanitarian catastrophe of tens of thousands of people who have been left without any foundations to build their lives on, and essentially abandoned not only by Armenia when they were under blockade, but until this day by Armenia inside Armenia. So it's a very tough anniversary. Has anything in your mind, Nare, gotten better since then? Or rather, what would you say are the major developments that have taken place since the exodus on the Artsakh file, or maybe even on the Armenian sovereignty file?
Well, as you mentioned, the Pashinyan regime propaganda has two main targets. One of them are Karabakhtis, as he calls the people of Artsakh, and the Russians. A year ago, they used this scare tactic of saying, oh, Russia is planning a coup. And so, ironically, those whose parents had taken the streets in defense of Artsakh, when it was like an anti-Moscow thing, Moscow actually like jailed dissidents. Suddenly, you found yourself in a situation where standing up for your fellow Armenians was suddenly viewed by this regime as something that was anti-Armenian and somehow pro-Russian. The absurdity of it is very interesting. So since then, despite all the mythology that somehow Artsakh was preventing Armenia from getting larger international consolidation. All of this turns out to be untrue because Armenia was not even able to get Aliyev to acknowledge the measly 29,000 square kilometers. So arguably, the whole thing, that the logic of what Pashinyan was doing was he was sacrificing Artsakh to at least get the safety of the rest of Armenia. But he was unable to secure even that because Aliyev just refused to show up to negotiations. Since
Indeed.
then, Artsakhi's, they try to resettle them in border areas. They don't really want to because it's dangerous and, it's a big downgrade. It's the terrible conditions of the accommodation that are offered by the government. Nobody wants to live there. So essentially they have this rents that have gone up. They don't have a homeland anymore. They don't really have jobs anymore. And Armenia finds itself in a more precarious situation security-wise.
Indeed. You mentioned that the government wants to settle them in the border areas, but of course, as we've seen, the government is also in the process of handing over various key locations, not only on the borders in Tavush that have exposed Armenia itself, but also key stretches of highway, key strategic heights that overlook key highways. So there's really no reason anyone would put any faith into this government to protect the borders. And as you said, this purported reasoning of Pashinyan, if we're to take what he says at face value, is that if we handed over Artsakh, then we could secure Armenia. However, that's been proven time and time again to be untrue, although today he says there's no threat to the citizens in Tavush, for example, from Azeri soldiers looking down at their children's school. So this pattern continues, and it continues to eat away at Armenia. I think we should just take a brief note because Pashinyan he may still be in New York for the UN General Assembly. He was giving a speech at the so-called future portion of this assembly, and he had a lot to say about his own political party. He had nothing to say about the hostages in Baku. Let's tune in for a bit, though, and listen to what his message was.
It may sound strange, but the most important thing we can do for the future is to create positive narratives and focus on the possibilities of creating the foundations for them, regardless of whether they exist at the moment or not. So, positive narratives, regardless of whether these things exist or not. Nare, this is all very fantastical. What is Aliyev, Nikol's peace partner, talking about these days?
Well, certainly Pashinyan has created a lot of positive narratives for Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijani population, and he probably promises to continue in this direction in his speech, because Aliyev says that his absolute priority is strengthening the country militarily, and against which target, of course, it is primarily Armenia, because we don't know of any other like regional adversary that Baku has right now. So that is Aliyev's priority, and they are also constantly putting this false news out there that Armenia is firing on Azerbaijani positions to create a pretext for their next attack. And what they're also doing is blaming the Armenian side for stalling negotiations, or for leaving all the parts in which aren't agreed upon yet, that the Armenian side is leaving them out. So it's just accusation after accusation, and in parallel, this Western Azerbaijan construct that Baku has created, it's just more and more resources continue to be poured in this direction.
Indeed, indeed. And as our audience well knows by now, if they've been watching, Azerbaijan at the presidential level claims all of Armenia as Western Azerbaijan, and that is not an imaginary narrative. That is not only a narrative, that is something they are actually actively working on, and which I would say this regime in Armenia is facilitating. I think that we should switch gears. I want to go to the recent rally that was held in Yerevan. Nare, you attended it. This was by the movement which began in Tavush last spring, protesting against Pashinyan's appeasement policies. Let's listen to a mother of a martyred soldier and what she had to say to the crowd.
Արցախում շիրիմ թողած մարդու վիշտը զգալ չեք կարող, բայց պատկերացնել կարող եք, եթե այս ցավը, մեր ցավը համարենք բոլորինս, համոզված եմ կհաղթենք։ Իսկ սրա լուծումը մեկն է, հեռացնել չարիք կոչված Նիկոլին և իր թիմին։
And we saw in the crowd her husband listening very emotionally, and of course he has been arrested and was jailed by this government since the war, and he was released after months of imprisonment over charges which were obviously not proven. Nare, what was her main message to the crowd?
Her main message was that if the pain that she feels, and of course nobody can actually feel that pain with her, but they can of course empathize, and if they are willing to share this pain and empathize with her condition, then we will be able to win over the conditions created by Pashinyan regime. And she even said, you know, the reason why we need to win is that so you guys will not find yourselves in my position, which was very emotional, and many in the crowd were crying. They had tears in their eyes. Of course, this was one of the most emotional parts of the entire rally. And of course, the message, unfortunately, by Anna Hagopian, Pashinyan's wife, has been that all our martyrs were for nothing, and she doesn't really allow, as Mrs. Galian mentioned, she doesn't allow the parents of the martyrs to even mourn properly, because they're urging them to move on, to be happy, and then start a new life. And also, like, the parents find themselves in a position where they also have to like protect the memory of their martyrs in Yarablur. from Pashinyan every year on this like holidays. Whenever there's like Independence Day or an occasion, and then the parents gather and they try to prevent the men that said that they could achieve we could have the same results without, killing their sons, to prevent him from visiting Yarabulur.
Indeed. And I think that we should just mention the context of this rally, this protest movement. We've been following it since the beginning. It began in Tavush, arrived to Yerevan last spring, and in mid-June was brutally suppressed by the police forces with stun grenades. We've interviewed participants who lost limbs, who have basically borne the physical and mental anguish of having their own government suppress them in order to continue in these appeasement policies. Nare, what has been going on since that time? How has Archbishop Bagrat Galstanian, who's been leading this movement and vowed not to give up despite the government suppression, what has he been up to over the summer in the different regions of Armenia, and why this gathering? What was his message about the next steps he believes that they should take?
There was a clear need to regroup after what happened in June, and the government used these violent measures and showed that they're just not going to stop. And it's a very difficult thing to bear responsibility for a lot of blood of these people, Armenian people. So Bagrat Sirpazan decided to take a step back and start all these visits. He visited all the regions of Armenia. He started going around different Yerevan yards and meeting people there. So essentially it was all this grassroots organizing work that he was doing. And now with the September rally, he announced that the movement is again entering an active phase. The next big gathering is October 2nd, and it's again going to be on the Republic Square.
Interesting. Okay, well, we'll be keeping an eye on that. Nare, thank you so much for your time, and we'll speak again next week.
Thank you, Alison.
Now let's go to Chantal Nasri, the chair of the ANCA, the Armenian National Committee of America of New York, who's taking the lead in planning this year's flagship event, its Gala, a time to take stock of the year's hard work and raise funds for the struggle to continue. Hi, Chantal. Welcome to Hairenik Media. To start off, tell us about what the ANC has been up to. What are some of the highlights from the year?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here to talk about some exciting initiatives in the Eastern region for the Armenian National Committee of America. Just quickly to kind of set the stage, the Armenian National Committee of America Eastern region is part of the largest and most influential American Armenian grassroots organization. So lobbying on the Hill is where you usually find us, meeting with congressional staff and state level staff. Over the course of the year, we are still prioritizing justice for the atrocities that have been happening and the ethnic cleansing happening in Artsakh ever since 2020. We've still not closed the loop there, so we have some new legislation that has come through this year that I'm happy to talk about, as well as every year our Leo Sarkisian interns, which we're so excited to host in DC, and we'll also be honoring at this year's gala. So a lot of educational programs, a lot of working with communities on the local level. Happy to discuss further.
Yeah, I would love to start off with the most current topic. You guys were just involved in a major advocacy push in DC. I saw you brought in a photographer from Artsakh. You showed the photos of what that genocide looked like in the rotunda. tell me about what you guys have been pushing for.
Absolutely. So Advocacy Days is also an annual promotion that we like to do to fly in folks from the West Coast and the East Coast as a DC initiative to help local constituents meet with their representatives on the Hill. And so our main focus at the moment and what we were trying to push at Advocacy Days is House Resolution 7288. This was authored by Representative Lawler, who's actually also a representative in New York. So we're super excited to have his support as well. And this is meant to repeal the waiver of Section 907 to restore congressional oversight over sending military aid to Azerbaijan. So this gives the power back to Congress versus it sitting with the president for veto power to waive. And again, main focus is justice for Artsakh. In the same vein for House Resolution 7288, Azerbaijan, as we know, has ties to Turkey and Russia, and it's really educating Congress that it's not beneficial to keep those relationships and all the destruction that comes along with it. We also have House Resolution 8148. This is the Azerbaijan Sanctions Review Act. The Armenian Legal Center has been working very diligently to put this act together, and they have presented case submissions to the state and treasury departments back in April 2024. Unfortunately, we have not heard back, so how we're leveraging local constituents is to continue to push from different angles by referencing specific Azerbaijani officials that were responsible for the recent ethnic cleansing in Artsakh. So it's really trying to play both a strategic political angle and still understanding that the most power that we have on the local level are constituents talking to the representatives, right?
Indeed. And you guys are always bringing those constituents from the Armenian community across the United States into DC, making sure that they're the ones knocking on the doors of their reps. You guys put on gargantuan efforts at all levels. I want to know, how do you guys keep sustainable? How does the ANCA keep going? And how can we help?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of ways. First and foremost, of course, donations are always appreciated and help the lights stay on in our business and operation. We also have staff on the Eastern region that help work as their job to push forward these initiatives and help rally up the community on the Eastern region. So that really helps there. I also previously mentioned the internship program, which is also super helpful in continuing the next generation in this work and happens every summer. And then the next and most exciting one is the gala that we have annually. So this year, the reason for my attendance on this newscast is also to talk about the gala that will be held in Queens, New York on October 19th. I'm very excited to be leading the efforts as a moment of reflection for all the really hard work that we do on the Eastern region to come together, not just in recognition of those efforts, but also to chart a new path forward.
Indeed. So it's a moment of recognition. It's a great way anyone can come, as I know, to support your efforts and enjoy coming together for a good cause. So tell me, what are the details of the gala? Till when can people sign up, and what can new attendees expect at the gala?
Yeah, so definitely an evening filled with an excellent reflection, as you mentioned, of the work that we've done. I have the QR code behind me to purchase tickets. We still have them available. The ticket will grant you access to our cocktail hour with an open bar and silent auction, which has been very meticulously curated by Armenian local businesses. We are so excited to highlight the partnerships that we have in New York and all the Armenians that are entrepreneurs who have their own businesses and products that you can all bid on. And then we will continue the evening into the dinner and program portion of the event. That begins at 7:30. Cocktail hour begins at 6. And I'm happy to announce too the folks that we will be recognizing. Congresswoman Grace Meng will be there in person. We're really excited to give her an award in honor of all of her allyship and work that she's done on the Armenian American community. She's a representative of New York Congressional District 6. And last year, you may have seen her made headlines in bringing back an American Armenian family from Artsakh who was not able to come back to their home in Queens. So she was able to send over grant them access to coming back home via flight. So we're happy for those efforts that she's done. We will also be recognizing Antranik Budakyan for the Vahan Kardashian Award. Vahan Kardashian goes back to the history of the ANCA and its birthright. Vahan Kardashian was a lawyer and started kind of the advocacy and the lobbying that we continue to do today. So this award is super important, and Antranik Budakyan has been a lifelong Hairenik supporter and activist in New York. He's a member of St. Sarkis Armenian Church in Queens. So again, another person close to home in Queens. Then we will also be recognizing posthumously Ara Kaprielian for his lifelong service, as well as Tony Vartanyan, who has helped to lead the efforts in New York, really. He was the chairperson 2 people before me. So I'm so happy to continue the work that he's done. And we'll also be awarding our Leo Sarkisian interns from these past months. So it's a really nice collection of not only old and new, but the continuing work that we do so in such dedication.
Amazing. Thank you so much for filling us in on that, and look forward to covering. Thank you so much, Chantal.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us on this week's NewsHour. Thank you all for joining us. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel @Hairenik or follow us on X, Facebook, and Instagram to keep up with events and hear about all of our programs. Thank you.